Now, some people will tell you that lynchings weren't happening in the 50s and 60s and that it was over. Well, that ain't true. There were still instances happening. And quite frankly, it's a sight that you never forget, nor that you want to see. See, there were some people in cities and counties across the nation sending postcards to people of lynchings. Do you know what a postcard is? You know that small rectangular piece of hard paper with the picture on the front, you can write on the back and send it on somewhere else? Well, some people would put on that picture on the front, would put a lynching on there where you see somebody hanging from a tree and people, crowds of people looking. Some people even looking at the camera smiling and send that on to other people. Now, that sounds a little disturbing and it maybe can cause nightmares for some people. But like I said, that's something you don't forget. Maybe they were trying to teach people like, hey, this is what's happening. Or maybe they were sending it to people like, hey, aren't you happy that this is happening? It wasn't fun at all. So you see, that was where we were. And that was what I was saying, where things could go sideways. So yes, sir, and no, sir, and yes, ma'am, and no, ma'am, and stepping off the sidewalk to let a white person walk through, and making sure you don't look them in the eye is what we had to do. I mean, it may sound crazy now and sound sad, but that's the way life was then. To try to not even think about that, sometimes I would just be happy to be in school. Do you enjoy school? Do you enjoy school? Do you have a favorite subject at all? Do you have a favorite subject? No? Do you have a favorite subject? Okay. Awesome. All right. How about you? You have a favorite subject? Science. All right. These are some good. I'm glad that you guys enjoy school enough to have these subjects. One of my favorite things was English and reading. Because at least with reading, I could escape and go on this journey and forget that everything we were dealing with at the time. And just have a breath of fresh air. But even in the midst of enjoying reading and people liking science and history, we were getting books, old books that the white schools were using. So the white students in white schools, they would get these new books and learning new stuff. And here we were getting all these old books, learning the old stuff. And we as a race were trying to move forward and improve ourselves, but they learning new stuff, and here we are learning the old stuff, and we had a disadvantage. And so it wasn't really good when you came to understand that part. But still you were learning, right? Still you could learn something and try to move forward. You know, my parents and their siblings, they would sometimes talk about wanting to better ourselves and get to a higher place and do better than what we were doing. But when you would listen to them, it just seemed like it was all talk. Nothing came of it. But then in the mid-50s, I was about 15, 16, or 17, things started happening. Boycotts were happening. You know, the Montgomery bus boycott. You know, Miss Rosa Parks, when she didn't give up her seat for a white person on the bus. See, after that, for 382 days, black people did not ride the bus. No matter the weather, no matter the treatment they faced as they were walking. I mean, if some black people had cars, they would drive other people around. But they did not ride the bus for 382 days to help make that point. Like, hey, we are here and we deserve to be treated fairly. We should be able to sit where we want to sit. So outside of the boycotts, there was also protests and demonstrations. So over there in Greensboro, North Carolina, there were sit-ins. Where kind of sort of like the bus boycott, where black people would go into restaurants and sit down in places that they weren't allowed to sit, or where they weren't supposed to be in the first place. But they would go in, sit down, and try to be respectful, always respectful, nobody was violent, and try to order food. And so people would then either start yelling, maybe start throwing stuff, maybe start trying to attack them, but they would sit there and let it happen. As much as they didn't like it, nobody would like to be in that situation. But then let it happen, just to help show that we deserve to be here. So outside of those, there were also organizations being formed. So the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, where they were helping people to vote, people registered to vote. And at the same time, there were student organizations that were formed, the Student nonviolent coordinating committee, whereas students in college, but they wanted to help be involved in what was going on. So all of this change was happening. And it seemed like all the talk that my family was talking was actually being put into action. People were actually doing the change. I know for me, I was quite excited because I didn't want to just sit around and just keep hearing and listening to people talk and do nothing about it. You got to have an action with your plan, right? And so, as that was happening, some of my siblings had went away to help me and be involved with the change. See, my parents and their siblings weren't too happy with that because, as I said earlier, there's no telling how things would go sideways. And they didn't want that for their children. But how can anything change if you don't step out and try? You see, I understand what my parents were saying because as they were growing up, that was the way of survival. If you don't do what they had taught us, well, there might frankly be no you. So I get their point, but change needs to happen, and you need to step out and try. And so in the midst of all of these changes happening, who was involved in just about all of it? Anybody? You? Yes, Dr. King was instrumental in it all. He was involved just about in the middle of it. Here he was, the Montgomery bus boycott. After Ms. Rosa Parks didn't want to get up and ended up in jail, the NAACP chapter met with him for them to discuss how do we move forward to get this boycott happening. They came to him to try to get that involved. And then with the protests, or the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, him and other ministers and civil rights leaders, they helped form that. And as I mentioned before, they helped get people registered to vote. Because you see, black people had the right to vote after the 15th Amendment. But when you lived in Jim Crow South, or what some people have later called the Dirty South, when you were there, all these other things were put into place. Poll tax, literacy test, you coming to go vote, but them telling you, hey, you came the wrong day, or you came a few hours too late, or a few hours too early. And then it was like, but I wanted to exercise my right to vote. How are you telling me all of this? And you know, Dr. King said in one of his speeches, I can't remember which one it was exactly, but he said, give us the ballot, and we would no longer worry the federal government about our basic rights. Give us the ballot, and we will no longer pressure the federal government about making a law, anti-lynching law. But we will vote by the power of our vote will change the law on the books in the South by ending the dastardly acts of hooded proprietors of violence. So talking about the KKK, what our votes can do can change things. The power of your vote matters. So you look at it, it's like you're preventing us from trying to help change things. But yet we see that there's power in it. So we need to try to get that to change so we can help change things in this nation. So you see, that's one of the things that he had talked about that for me. And then at the same time, as I said, that student nonviolent coordinating committee, they were also doing things. So those sit-ins, some of my older siblings, they were a part of that. So they would send us letters talking about the things that they dealt with, send us letters about who was coming up to them and whatnot. I mean, in some ways, reading it was a little disheartening, but it was like, my siblings are on the front lines doing these things. I'm like, I can't just sit there and not do anything myself. And so, outside of all those things that Dr. King was helping with, he was also leading protests and other demonstrations. Have you heard about them being in Birmingham, Alabama, where they were walking, protesting peacefully down the street, and as they're walking, there are fire hoses and dogs leading them. Can you imagine that? Like, you sitting up here with me, we were walking down the street, and all of a sudden there's just water gushing out of fire hose at you and dogs coming after you? Well, it's not fun at all. Also, it seems like it would hurt. But during that same time, Dr. King and those demonstrators were arrested. And some of those are known as the Birmingham letters, where he kind of laid out his nonviolent theory and approach to try to make change. And then a few months later, I believe it was, he gave that famous "I Have a Dream" speech. I mean, you all know that. That's one that we're taught about a lot. I have a dream that one day my 4 little children will live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. That just helps go to show what he was striving for, all of us. Now, his children, but all of us in general, no matter what we look like. To be able to walk hand in hand, just be judged by the things we do, what we present, not the way that we look. Well, not too long after, I believe it was 1968, unfortunately, the year that he was assassinated, he also started the Poor People's Campaign. But of course, that also did not matter what color you were, but just looking at the economic disenfranchisement of people. Like, we need to do better as a nation for poor people. We can't keep doing things and letting them just wallow away. So yes, he was a nonviolent approach, but during that time, he talked in New York, which I was there by this time. 1966, I made my way on up there. Couldn't stay in Mississippi no more. Made my way on up there and started living in, lo and behold, he ended up speaking at the local, I cannot remember the number it was up there, but he ended up speaking. And one of the things that he ended up saying was, it is the final analysis that a riot is the language of the unheard. What is it America has not heard? So, you see, he was about nonviolence, but he understood why people were rioting at that time. You didn't agree with it, wasn't his best approach, but he knew why it was happening. America wasn't listening to them. It's like if people try to talk to you, if I was talking to you right now, just talking, and talking, but you were looking somewhere else, and then looking over there, and then looking over there, not even listening to me. But if I start jumping up and down, getting in your face, then maybe you would start to see me. And unfortunately, that's the way some things went. People rioting just to get the attention that people weren't listening to you. I tell you, it was a mighty time just to hear that and to understand. And unfortunately, people did end up rioting after he died just because of the impact that he had on lives. People's lives, to make change and to have people instilling themselves in that burning fire, like, I want to make change too. So I'm going to go ahead and get out of your way because I've probably just been battling way too long for you. But there are a few things I want you to leave away with. One, your vote matters. Understand that your vote matters, no matter what color, your age, or your vote matters. People may say, but you can't vote for president right now. You can't vote for city council. It don't matter if you can't do that right now because you can still vote in little ways. So your parents are asking you, hey, what do you want for dinner? And they'll give you a choice. That's a vote. When you're in school and they're like, hey, maybe what movie do we want to watch? That's a choice, but it's still a vote because you have to put your hands up, right, to see who wants to do what. So I want you to understand now, these little things, understand, keep that in mind so as you get older, when you can vote for president, when you can vote for city council, that your vote matters. Don't let nobody tell you that it doesn't. Because as I said before, people had to go through literacy tests and poll tests and taxes to say that they couldn't vote. Because we know what? Voting makes a change. Voting holds power. So remember that. Voting holds power. The other thing I want you to remember is it doesn't matter how old you are, but you can make a change. So at the time that Dr. King was doing the things he was doing, he was in his mid-20s. Now for some of you that may seem a little older to where you are. But once you hit adult, your mid-20s are still kind of young. So here this young man is, making these changes that some older people were like, why are you doing this? Just like my parents and their siblings were. Why are you putting yourself in danger to get hurt? but he understood and believed in the power that change has. Stepping out on faith, stepping out knowing that you yourself, with other people who believe the same thing, can help make change. So remember that. And the other thing, remember not to be judged by the color of your skin, but by the content of your character. Your character being how you speak, the actions that you give out. So when I'm talking to you, part of my character is showing. If I'm holding the door for you, part of my character is showing. Remember that, and remember your words hold power. This may be a biblical quote phrase, but even outside of that, it holds very true. Life and death lies in the power of your tongue.
Amen.
I can say something to you to build you up, or I can say something to you to put you down. And some people, whatever you say will stick with them and help them go in whatever direction they choose to go in. Yes, they have a choice to, however they act on what you say. But what you said still affected them in some way. So remember, your voice, what you say to people, is a part of your character. What you do to people, what you do for people, is a part of your character. And that's what you want people to judge you on. Not because of the color of your skin or your ethnicity. But also you need to be mindful of what you're doing and what you're saying. Because you don't want the two to get conflated to where you're doing some ugly stuff to people and saying some ugly things. But then it seems like people are, to you it looks like people are blaming your color and not what you're doing, when it is exactly what you're doing and not your color. That makes sense. So be good to people, be good to yourself. The other people will see that. All right now, y'all remember those three things. Voting is power. No matter what age you are, you can hide the harness to do. And just keep holding on to that as you grow. And pay attention to things as they're happening. Ask questions when you need to ask questions. Remember, you can make a change. Don't let somebody tell you that you can't. See you.